Art has always been an important aspect in human culture, from cave paintings to video games. It allows us to connect, tell stories, and express ourselves. Of course, in recent years, with the development of AI, the AI is now creating imagery itself. So there's new ways that we've never expect to explore creativity and create art. But is it art? And is it legal? Is it going to take my job? Should I still be an artist? These are all questions and concerns a lot of us have had, myself included. It's the most requested topic. So today we're going to be getting into a lot of that. So if you're new here, I'm Tyler Edlin. I'm a professional artist and illustrator, and we're going to be creating this image on screen, and we'll be chatting AI art. So let's go. Alright guys, let's clear off a few things and maybe talk a little bit of an overview here. AI and art can generally be understood in two different ways. Number one, AI in the process of analyzing existing art, and two, AI in the process of creating new art. We're pretty much going to be focused on category 2 here today. Now, AI art, for those who don't know, have gone all the way back to the 1950s and 60s, where the computer were able to generate simple patterns and shapes. And they were all based from algorithms to create patterns to be rendered right on the computer scheme. Freyder-Nagel, for example, produced a square matrix, filled it with numbers. They were multiplied successively by itself, and it resulted in new matrices, which were translated into predetermined intervals. All right, so fast forward to the 1970s and 80s, and AI-generated art became used a little bit more extensively in computer-aided design, CAD. The CAD software itself usually allows designers to create and manipulate three-dimensional shapes and polygons on a computer, right, which ultimately led to more realistic images. But in 1973, an artist named Harold Cohen developed a set of algorithms. They were collectively known as AIR, and that allowed the computer to draw with the irregularity of freehand drawing, which is usually pretty different, associated than what a computer could do, which is very calculated and algorithm based. Then, of course, in the 90s, AI-generated art became used for more than just visual effects. Artists began using the AI algorithms to generate music, to create new forms of poetry. AI-generated art is used in various fields, including advertising, architecture, fashion, and film. AI algorithms can generate images or videos based on a set of parameters, or create new images by combining and altering existing ones, right? This is the big concern that's happening nowadays. This is what everybody's talking about. I'm not going to get technical because I'm not a technical person, but basically it takes the input information, whether it's an artist's name or a preconceived image itself, and through layers it basically tries to reconstruct that style over many passes. Of course, the computer does this almost instantly, and it can reconstruct using those surface textures, basically apply those to the different type of outputs, whether it's a different kind of image or whatever kind of prompt is given to it. With that said, my initial thoughts of it is that it's really, really cool. There's simply things that I've never thought I'd see combined, different ways of interpreting, styles, and having basically ideas mixed and matched in various kinds of ways. So, of course, initially it's very fun and very impressive. I just never thought the computer would be able to whip something up like that, and as fast as it does. My own personal experience is pretty much just limited to Midjourney, but I've seen people posting various things from DALL-E and other things, and while they do have different strengths and weaknesses, of course, between the various programs, but overall, I think from a technical standpoint, it's actually very impressive. But right, it's at a point where it can be a bit too much. I'm kind of getting over it. You're right. It's been going on for maybe a few months now. You can't go anywhere. ArtStation, Instagram, Facebook, without really getting spammed with various types of AI art, despite me finding a select pool of it actually pretty really cool. There's also exponential amounts that really don't really inspire or uh, capture my interest whatsoever. And because I'm getting so familiar with what and how a lot of the AI can look, and I'm sure many of you feel that same way, they're becoming gradually less and less exciting, right? Subconsciously, it's just not, uh, getting, like, subconsciously, it's just simply not as exciting as it was, 8 weeks ago. There's certain patterns, rhythms, and textures. Like, you could go to ArtStation, you could just browse. You can instantly almost pick. If you have like a trained eye that's seen like a lot of art, you can start to instantly start to see in many cases which ones are AI versus which ones are not. Now, I do want to be careful there, as I don't want to kind of get my words misinterpreted in any way, and I don't want to directly say I feel like the threat of the, because that's where a lot of the concern is. That's probably what brought you a lot to this video is, how threatening to the career and to the industry is AI art. And again, I don't want to say it's like overstated, but I do think a lot of that fear tends to come from people that haven't used it as extensively, or for people that have relatively lower experience overall. Again, the students and potentially even junior artists. Because at best, if you do have some experience with it, it really just approximates what humans have already created, right? And it, like I said earlier, it kind of just like regurgitates it, it remixes it in a way. But again, in my initial thoughts here, I don't see it, at least right now. I know it can't handle the specific briefs that many clients really demand. Not all clients. Sure, there's enough vague and generalized clients out there that don't need as specific of tasks to be done, but for kind of high end illustration, things like Magic the Gathering and, art for Fantasy Flight, to specific game development design and the concepts needed for those, I just don't see how it can solve as specific of a task that needs to be done on the day to day. But there are, I think, some hard truths and some things we are embracing as a community and as a bunch of creators. So even though on the day to day the AI can't do my call outs and my breakdowns, my pre alpha paint overs, to my layouts, to my even my color keys, it is very, very good at rendering very fast. Most of my week is actually at this point looking at a lot of student work. And, the AI is a lot better than a lot of art that's out there, created by humans. The AI art can produce things that I am not physically, mentally even capable of. I'm not perfect either. It's like I said, technically impressive. This is, I think, where a lot of that concern is. It simply can hit this technical fidelity that takes us years to be able to achieve by hand. If we're talking drawing and painting, 3D might be able to go a little faster nowadays, of course, with their built-in rendering engines. But anyone that's been in this field for a while, I think, can tell you, making an image rendered, right? The act of like making an image visually look, like pleasing and good, that's really only 20% of the total job. And while it's just part of the job, I do feel that there are going to be some markets it's going to affect, and of course sooner than later. Art is a very, very large business. For brief historical context here, just imagine the amount of hand painted illustrations, posters, book covers, in the 1980s. It was everywhere. Hand created art, hand created by awesome, talented artists, were just all over the industry. Skip about 20 years to like 2005, give or take, and look at what it's been replaced by. Lots of Photoshop, photoshopped imagery, Photoshop photography, Photoshop 3D or 3D itself, right? It has replaced a large part of that market. Simply put, a lot of publishing houses prefer to use digital imaging software now to produce their commercial art. Is the art all gone? No, not really. The industry just sort of changed, right? It shifted. For example, for this video, I wanted to change and experiment with how I could approach to making this very image you see on screen. So normally what I would do is probably just sketch it out using paper or pencil, or just do a really brief sketch in Photoshop. It'd look very crude and very rough. Maybe I would assign one of my artists to kind of be able to do that tasks. But with this one, I wanted to approach it a little differently. I went a little out of my circles to hire someone that I knew that was using AI art, quite a bit, and was a little bit more familiar with it than myself. So I hired Dean here, in this case, with a prompt that I gave of like a person fighting a very big mechanical, like AI based kind of robot. Again, to really thematically tie in with this episode. And I got a lot of really cool results from Dean, very, very quickly. It's something that I don't think him or I couldn't, normally produce on our own, just to kind of really just spit out a bunch of ideas, just to kind of get that project going forward. Right, so it's cool, very affordably and very fast. I was able to get a lot of options to kind of pick and curate, and to see what could steer a little bit of the direction of this idea that I had. So I had narrowed it down originally to more or less these four. I kind of like, this is kind of what I originally had in my mind. This kind of just clarifies that a little bit more for me, and that's how I could see me really using AI if I pursued this more in the future. It's a tool, and I'll get more into that. But it helps me from a business standpoint. It helps me push ideas further, affordably, creatively. It offers me a lot of different options, so I can see what I don't like by seeing a lot of options originally. Things that, again, have a higher fidelity than my own sketches tend to have. It clarifies certain things, and of course it inspires me to go in certain directions. So what I ended up doing here on this particular image is I kind of had a mix of all of these. And I think what I did was I copy and pasted that into a new document. And I see this is from a lot of the professionals that I talk to. This is kind of similar to what a lot of people would do. They would take a rough idea from the AI, right? And then start pushing that forward and using, basically Photoshop and other things to kind of use it to overpaint and to kind of make a little bit more theirs or mine, in a sense, where it's like, okay, like this, again, this was a foundation. This is a foundation of an idea. It needs like a lot of tweaking. I ultimately wanted to go with some universes colliding. So I had, Google. I was looking up that in Google. Again, this is a hard reference. You get very limited results when you kind of type worlds and universes colliding. So again, that was another prompt altogether that I had the designer that I hired to kind of spit in some universes colliding, and what kind of comes from that. And again, that was really cool to kind of see the results that kind of came up, because it was a lot more interesting than what I was getting from Google, at least initially. As you can see, some of the results from that, very cool stuff. There's some problems with it, of course, but they're really cool to kind of see what, again, that AI is gonna to kind of pop up. And again, it's really helping me figure out some of the ideas that I want to put into place for this image. But for now, anyways, I just went with a standard Google kind of mock-up like this. My clients do this when they need work from me. I do this from the people that I hire. It's just part of the process. This has not changed at all. The AI simply just offers more options at this particular rough stage of creating an image. And then of course I painted over and mocked up, a little bit of a regular kind of typical girl there. That's where it was going at this point. But this, again, it's a mix of painting, little mix of photo bashing, little mix of AI art, is now serving as the template for like how I've progressed, or the direction that I took the entire image that we've been seeing play out, in this video so far. So basically, long story short, all I did was kind of take this and then start rebuilding it from scratch, from 3D, which I hired my awesome assistant, Mike Hayes, to do. He built that robot that's been on screen up to this point. He did a wonderful job, and then I brought that into Blender, used my own building and rubble kits to kind of mock up that scene, and then we have the render, and then of course we're finally in to the part where I'm painting over the entire scene. Now, really the steps that I'm going to make from here out with this image are largely artistic ones. The computer fed me out stuff based off its own algorithms, and the issue with AI is that it's entirely based on algorithms. So when everything is kind of based off predetermined and set parameters, the artistic side of things can get stunted. And because I really have fun at this stage in the painting, I really like to get into it. I like to express the style. I like to kind of create different things that doesn't necessarily make the most realistic sense in terms of why something might be lit or shaped the way it is. I try to make it work artistically at this stage, and this is what the AI really is not great at doing. Therefore, I'm not quite as worried about it as some other people are. I don't feel that any amount of technology can kill our artistic expression when it comes to it at the end of the day. Yes, like I said, the market constantly changes, it constantly evolves, jobs change. And like anything, I think we just have to really adapt, and at least for the time being, in regards to like the legality of it, in terms of like what's kind of accepted. I know there's sites out there that are banning AI art, and that in some places it's simply just not allowed. But like anything, I'm taking every day with a grain of salt, and I'm trying to just adapt, as I am with this whole demo here, to a certain kind of workflow that could utilize it where necessary. As always, I don't need to do this for every image. I don't need to do this for every kind of client, but I do know, like, having gone through this process and trying it, it is a viable option if it will, work with a particular type of job. There's more shortcuts now than ever before. First, Photoshop made painting faster. Then there was 3D, which made iterations a lot faster. Then there's VR, and now it's AI. At the end of the day, none of these replace my creativity or operate exactly like I do. They just help me express my own, inner creativity, my own stories. And I do think, I do like to throw it out there that we can often enough get in our own way of limiting ourselves with fear, among other emotions. We can overcomplicate things, whether it's the process or the techniques. And our own set of ideas can establish our own limiting beliefs. But I don't think we should always go to like the extreme end of that pessimistic side of it. This is a tool, and it can definitely help things in certain particular areas, for sure. But when it comes to consistency and being able to make a style that will carry through an entire project, I do think it's going to just require way too many humans to actually do that. So as a tool, and into my own process with this image, I could see AI art, at least for now and for me, as being kind of like an alternative to Pinterest, or as an additional referencing aspect. It's really cool at just spitting out ideas and bouncing things off of, right? And I do think a lot of inspiration is going to be drawn from that. I have said that, but it just can't be specific enough yet, right, for true design work. And there's a lot of debates out there about the value of AI art and what that could do to the value of us as artists and the art that we create, right? Some out there will say, oh, it's going to help our productivity, it's going to streamline our workflows, it's absolutely going to allow us to output far more than we can currently do. And others simply say it's going to just cheapen the entire craft and it's going to just increase the output expected of us. I think there's truth on both sides of those, but it's really going to depend and come down to very specific markets on how much it'll get affected and in which ways. I think there will be an influx of really cheap looking art and everything out there because AI art is so, in fact, commonplace. There's going to be a ton of it. But I don't think it's going to depreciate the value of anyone out there doing it, the old school way, the conventional method. I mean, look at it like a highly skilled musician, videographer, architect, filmmaker, whatever you want to call them. They're always still in high demand. They're always still creating very beautiful, more memorable things, more than you could get at a stock site, right? More than we can try to use with cheap imitations or knockoffs or synthesizers even, right? Like there's always a demand for a highly skilled person in a particular field. So like I said, some markets might be affected. Yeah, it might be like the indie art scene in general, as it's just easier and cheaper and more cost effective for some people to get a hold of art assets. And again, the bigger issue is going to be when they say that's good enough. I mentioned earlier, I think the real utility with AI art is bouncing ideas off of that, editing them, sifting through them, and then taking them and shaping them to your will, to shaping an idea to my will. I'm using the AI art as a tool. The issue will be when people say that's good enough. When an untrained eye gets a hold of that or uses it regularly and say that is good enough, and that will cheapen the craft to some degree. Of course it's going to. There's going to be so much of it. And yes, some artists will have less of a job. How many of us out there started in a creative field by doing those cheaper sort of book cover commissions or card arts by some independent creator? Yeah, it's going to be easier for them now to just absolutely produce that through AI art if that is good enough for their particular standard. It's going to be on the moral responsibility of the person using it. But I mean, if they're still sitting there and they're able to sell that, I mean, there's the legality of that. I'll get into that soon. But if they're still selling that, and people are buying it, then who am I to say like what that person's taste is? So yeah, certain art jobs out there might be more of a commodity. They might go to, like a higher end professional at this point, which yes, that is an issue because there'll be fewer total jobs for the beginner artist, I think, because now all of a sudden an art lead or a senior artist could then manage a bunch more artists and have them use AI to increase output. So they might not need the total amount of artists that they had before. Sure, that's a very realistic possibility. I wouldn't lose sleep over it. I just use that as an incentive to work harder at your craft, because again, the computer can't work or think like us. And first of all, this is a service-based industry and field, and the client to artist relationship is still extremely of a high value. So again, the market here with the biggest change and overall impact, I think, is going to be the indie stuff, because a lot of the larger corporations probably are going to go about it another ways I can't predict or foresee, because again, the AI art or the AI imagery even is evolving constantly. But one of the larger ramifications of this particular period in time, I think, is that there's going to just be a period of an influx and a flood of really bad, kind of AI art. It's just going to be everywhere, and there's a lot of untrained eyes making the calls, like, "Oh, this is good enough," and then it will, But I think, with that said, of course, once the legal stuff finally develops and matures, I think there will be some measures put into place that's going to slow a lot of this down. And then there's the legality of it all. There's a lot to unpack there. I know very little on the subject of the legal stuff. I have my morals and my ethics. It's kind of all tied together. But I think a lot of these AI softwares, I'm not sure about individually, but, kind of between Stable Diffusion and Midjourney, which ones specifically are open source. But I don't think right now you can actually put a copyright on the creations created or generated by the AI, which is kind of an issue. And I do think within them they each have their own subscription services with different pay tiers that allow you to use certain ones for commercial projects. But then, like, if you're using art created by other art for a commercial project, like, see, it gets muddy so quickly. So if a lot of this art can't be copywritten, if any actual serious, like, larger company needs art, I don't think they're gonna fire all their staff, fire all the artists, and then just go to AI, because they can't own it. Companies like to own their own intellectual properties. And like I said before, it might only get a little wishy-washy on the lowest of the totem pole with some indie studios that try to pass AI art, as their own to kind of fit their budgets. And as far as I know, a person needs to be paid under a company for that company to own the art produced. So I guess, again, the issue would be when someone is publishing work under a certain company and claiming that they created it, when in fact maybe they used an entirely AI generated image. So right, again, you'll have to have your own moral compass, or someone somewhere it's going to have to standardize that all. I don't have that kind of solution. So it's a lot. So yeah, I do think it's just going to be a mess for a while, and there's going to be a lot of continued discussions and debates online as this all moves forward. I hear a lot of people kind of talking about, like, well, it could be a little bit more like Spotify, where artists opt their art into these massive databases of art that the AI is kind of pulling from, where if you do get reference and part of that prompt, you'll get paid out by X amount of revenue. And there's part of an issue too, like with the bigger artists out there, the bigger living artists out there. Greg Rutkowski, a very popular Polish artist, now he does fantasy art. I believe his art, he was claiming in an article that his name was used in the prompt 93,000 times, right? Like, that's a ton. And like he says, he felt that it's all going to be cool. It's just more free exposure. But the issue came up, as he pointed out, that like when he would type his name into Google, he's getting art that is not his, but his name, right, is kind of secondhand attached to, because it was used in some kind of prompt or inspiration. And his own art is not showing up in like Google searches anymore. Of course it is, but like, to a degree it's getting affected by that, right? So there's a lot at play here. I have people messaging me, look, this database says your art, 25 of your images was used into there. Personally, I'm not bothered by that. It's honestly quite flattering that someone out there thinks my art's good enough to be a part of that whole thing. And like I was telling them, unless I could like specifically pick out some pixels that were hand painted by me in someone else's art and they're profiting from that, then I might get like a little soggy about that. But I'm not gonna lose sleep over that. Not at this point in time. It's still too early. There's still too much really undeclared with this. So for now, I just have to be positively optimistic on the potential of where things could go. But I see accounts where people are selling full-on created tarot decks at like art conventions being completely made by AI. Again, with the legal and commercial use of it all, it's quite murky. And then, it's at least a very morally diversive issue, to say the least. Some people saying they shouldn't be able to sell that type of art there. But like, if people are buying that art, then like, okay, well, the market says it's fine. But, does the artist own all that to begin with, right? But does artists own the rights when they're selling fan art at these things anyway, right? Like, see, it's so muddy. And who's the authority on any of this? But the market is constantly changing and evolving, like with any new art movement. And of course, there's going to just be lines drawn in the sand as we adapt to these things. Who didn't see that article a week or two ago where a person was winning an art competition by submitting their art online, and it was pretty much AI driven. I think the artists claim they painted over it a little bit, but it's like, ooh, you know, that's a pretty dodgy situation. Does art competitions have to now designate or specify what art is allowed and what is not allowed, right? Like, is this a 2D digital art competition? Is this a 3D digital art? Is this a 3D sculpting art competition? Is this a traditional oil? Is this an AI permitted? I think this is an easier one to solve. You just really need to specify or have very specific divisions and fit, all the work categorically and appropriately into those divisions. It's like the Olympics. The Olympics has divisions for everything. Art competitions might just need to buckle down a little bit more. All right, I kind of got to wrap this up. I've been going on for a while, but this is not just going to affect artists moving forward. This is going to affect anyone in the visual field. That's without a doubt. Especially since there's no way, at least at this point, to have our artwork removed from such services and programs. And as I was talking about a lot earlier in the video, and into a lot of your own concerns, is, again, this is speeding things up a lot in an already very fast world, almost to a fault at this point. Oh, we can produce images so fast. All of the expectations on our creative output is going to be raised, right? Like that for me, that might be a little where my bigger problems are right now, because I do think if you want hand painted, no AI driven art, it kind of like what we got going on here, it would take a lot longer to spit out that sort of work. But again, it's just another ramification of a technologically driven world that we live in. I mean, they call us the 140 character line culture. We've gone from writing letters to making phone calls to sending, text messages and tweets. But I don't think you should put any of your own hopes and dreams on hold. I still recommend and tell all my students, don't go chasing that instant gratification that can come with the speed of this AI, because it's a very dangerous and slippery slope. Because imagine if you do get a job by kind of squeezing very AI driven work into your portfolio. You get a job, you get a client, and they let's use my robot example here for an example. Like, what if the client kind of liked this up to this stage, and we had based it all off the AI because we didn't have any other kind of skill to get it here from scratch. And then the client last minute, and this does happen, says, well, we need a completely different angle of this exact design, of this exact scenario. We'll double the pay, we'll give you an extension, but we need this exact same thing pulled back with a camera shift. The AI can't do that for you. And that's what I was talking about earlier. The AI cannot be that specific to the specificness of any kind of client need right now. So I still don't think there's a ton for us to worry about. I can of course do that because I could redraw, I can reposition all the 3D, I could do it there and that's why I'm not worried personally, because I have the skills to back up what I need to provide to my clients to keep them happy. So if you're taking lots of shortcuts, right, if someone like me, or if we use too many shortcuts in 3D and our drawing is weak, well, that's on us, right? Like, that's my responsibility. Likewise, if I did too much AI to upsell a lot of my work and I didn't have the painting or drawing skills to back up what was the AI was doing, that's going to get me in trouble, right? Personal trouble. But accomplishment, true accomplishment and mastery takes time, it takes reflection, and the only successful formula with this is hard work. And all of us creators should never stop working hard at our craft, especially if we love it. Even if the art AI came through, right, and took over all of our jobs 10 years down the line, would I still stop creating at the end of the day? Absolutely not. I might be in a different field altogether. Sure, I had to pivot to survive and feed my family, but I'm still gonna make art. I will always still be here, making these videos, making Instagram posts, making my fantasy worlds, because I love it. I love the process, and if you love the process, nothing should hold you back either. All right, if you want to get in, let's discuss more of this in the comments. be happy to go through it there. And I don't expect everyone to always agree with me on this. That's perfectly great too. This is just my take on it. So dear designers, artists, illustrators, you don't have to fear the future. I don't think not nearly as much as some of you have been. You just simply have to build towards it. Adapting to anything new can be scary, but it also creates new opportunity. Look, when I hired Dean for this particular image to help me out with some of the AI sketches with this, that was a new job we kind of created for this. But these new technologies, they can help us discover what we can and we cannot have done before. We could see things differently that we may have overlooked prior, and we can find alternative ways to rethink our old ideas. But yeah, the AI has a lot of ethical things that need to get worked out, and there's certain level of responsibility we need to take as creators, I feel, when using it. But deep down, I do feel as a tool, it can offer a lot. It can reinvigorate how I approach making images. I can adopt it into my creative pipeline as seen here today, and it allows me to think and approach problems in a completely different way. So don't give up on yourself yet. It doesn't all have to be doom and gloom. Give yourself a chance. Heck, give AI a chance if you want to mess around for a bit. And again, I'd like to thank Mike Hayes for helping me out with the 3D on this. I'd like to thank Anna for helping out with the character rendering that you see here. They all did a terrific job. But yeah, I'll catch you guys next time.